Hi, I'm Dan McMahon. And this past summer, 20 of us went on a trip which we call the Road to Civil Rights. This is a class where we get to study the history and the movement of the civil rights era by actually visiting important places there. We have a project that we put together which we want to show you what we have done. My enormous thanks to my colleagues, Pat Smith and John McConnell, and all 17 of the students who went with us.
Hi, my name is Israel Natison. I'm a sophomore at DeMatha, class of 2028, and I'll be presenting on Nashville. And we got to Nashville. It was about a 10-hour drive from DeMatha Catholic, which we left in the morning. And it took a really long time. So when we got off the bus, it was really great because we got to stretch our legs, got to walk. And then we got some real food at Hattie B's Hot Chicken, which we were treated to by a class of 1970, Rob Lawrence, a DeMatha alum. And our waiter, Latavia, was also there, and she was great, a nice, hospitable person. When we got there, they gave us a party room, kind of, and we were in a back room with food, and it was all presented to us for free. The next day after that, we went to downtown Nashville. We went to FW Woolworths, which they had sit-ins earlier back during the civil rights movement. Then we went to the downtown Nashville courthouse, and we saw that it's a historic place, which they had protests there. And also by there was the Nashville County Jail. Later on, we went over to Clark Memorial United Methodist Church, which held nonviolent meetings that members of SNCC had went to earlier, which included people like Diane Nash and John Lewis. And then we went to Fisk University, and we explored their campus, and we went to their library, and then later a professor talked to us there.
I'm Sam Brewer, class of 26. The next day, we drove to Memphis and visited the National Civil Rights Museum at the Lorraine Motel. It's the site where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. It was a motel when he went to it, and then in the 90s, it was converted into the National Civil Rights Museum by 3 black businessmen who bought up the property after the city was going to condemn the building. They have the cars that were the same cars as when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated there, so it's almost like the moment's frozen in time, and so everything is exactly the same as it was on the day he was shot. And then inside the museum, they have a really nice exhibits, and they included one that really stood out to me that had Rosa Parks, the bust, and it had a statue of her sitting here during her courageous protest. And then later, as you walk the museum, you actually get to see the inside of Dr. King's room, where you can actually see, they still had, it was a recreation. They still had his breakfast laid out, his bed, and everything, and then the balcony, of course, where he was shot. And I've seen pictures of this before, but seeing it in person had a really profound impact, and it really stood out to me as a really important part of the trip.
Hello, I'm Zadine Ryan, class of 2028. At the Lorraine Motel, which, as he said, was made into a museum in 1991. We saw a lot of really cool stories, some inspirational, some sad. We also saw this really, really cool sculpture of the United States made entirely of American slaves. And there are also a lot of short films throughout the museum that we could see, just to give you a sense of what it was like back then. And then there was also, throughout the whole museum, there was a very big emphasis on nonviolence and unity and using your voice as a weapon and not your fists. And then after the Lorraine Motel, we went to Corky's Barbecue, and that's where we wrapped up our night in Memphis.
When we went to Selma, we visited the Dallas County Courthouse where Sheriff Jim Clark halted a lot of African Americans who were trying to vote from registering. And also this alongside the murder of Jimmy Lee Jackson led to the Bloody Sunday March, which happened on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, which I'll talk about in the next slide. Yeah, so we walked the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and these are a few people who were involved in it, including John Lewis, who many of you guys know from reading the book March, and the Bloody Sunday March is actually a part of book 1. And we also visited Memorial Park at the end of Edmund Pettus Bridge, where we met Miss Tanya Dixon, who really gave us a lot of insight on what's happening in Selma right now and what's happening with their efforts involving the renaming of the bridge, which they wanted to do but weren't allowed to because it's a historical site. And yeah, the reason Bloody Sunday was so successful is because it was televised in the media, and it really showed that the people that were marching weren't the aggressors, and they were being peaceful, and it was the police officers who were aggressing and beating them and doing horrible stuff.
Next, we went to Montgomery, Alabama, and there we went to the Legacy Museum. At the start of the Legacy Museum, there was a description of the slaves who were taken during the transatlantic slave trade, which showcased the brutality of slaves and just how they were traded all across the world. And then next was another important detail in the museum was the lynchings that happened. Even some of those lynchings happened in Montgomery County, so we aren't innocent to these brutal attacks against slaves.
During my visit to the Legacy Museum, I expanded my knowledge on the brutal journey us African Americans had to endure for freedom. We learned how they survived the harsh conditions of plantations, their routes to the north, and how they adapted to their surroundings. This image shows a poem depicting the painful life of African Americans in the 1800s. Next, my favorite part of the museum was the art. Seeing the blood, sweat, and tears go into the art depicting African Americans suffering and freedom really touched my heart. Most importantly, it made me reflect on how far we have come as a community and how we will never stop growing.
My name is Michael Greenleaf. I'm a junior, class of 27, and I'm here to talk about the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, also known as the Lynching Memorial. It's a very big open courtyard almost, and with big monuments that put on display of the amount of racial terror. Something that I really noticed about this place is that it was very quiet and it's like on a hill, but I think that noise or like the silence is very loud because of all the racial terror. Next slide, please. So I think what was most memorable to me was the emotional impact that it had because like the sheer amount of just like innocent individuals that were being lynched for like no reason at all. It's just like heart-wrenching to see. As you can see, like all of those boxes, there's like hundreds of thousands of individuals.
So on each one of these orange boxes, there's a bunch of names under each county. And all of these names are names of people who had been lynched in that specific county. And there were hundreds of these boxes all over the memorial. So it just shows how many names and how many people suffered the lynchings and the magnitude of what happened here. There were more specific signs, such as this one showing Wicomico County in Maryland, which also shows the proximity to where I live right now, because I never really thought about how close some of things might have happened. I really only thought that it was in the south, or more south, and this was along with a bunch of other signs just like this one that were more specific, had a lot more details than on the boxes, and showed unbiased accounts of what actually happened. And this is all in a separate space in the memorial.
All right, so on our way to Montgomery, we visited the city of St. Jude's Parish. This was the fourth and final stop of the march to Montgomery. Nuns and priests at the parish treated wounds that marchers may have gained from the attacks or walking for a long period of time. Due to it being the final night of the march, a rally was held to sort of boost the morale of the marchers. Celebrities came out to perform. This fact surprised me because I thought about how much the celebrities stuck their neck out to show support for this cause, for this movement. It was very radical at the time, so showing support for this would definitely cause them to lose a lot of their fans. At the time, I wasn't even aware that there were stops on the way to Montgomery. But even before this march, the city of St. Jude's Parish had historical significance in the civil rights movement due to it being the first integrated hospital for blacks and whites, meaning it treated both of them. I also learned that MLK had his children born there, and I admired the decision of the priests to house the marchers because they were obviously in the South in a mostly hostile area, so they obviously faced attacks after doing this. But they stuck to Christian values, and that's what's needed in the time of change.
So next we visited Morehouse College in Atlanta. Morehouse was founded in 1867 with the original name of Augusta Institute. And at Morehouse, they go by the 5 wells, which are well-dressed, well-read, well-spoken, well-traveled, and well-balanced. And until 1913, Morehouse was named Augusta Institute. And after 1913, it was renamed to Morehouse after Henry Morehouse, who was a white minister in the South. And it was named after him due to his significant contributions towards the school. And right here in this picture, we were in the Martin Luther King Jr. International Chapel. And one thing that stuck out to me was the fact that they had exactly 2,501 chairs. And that extra 1 chair signifies that there's always room for 1 more. You can go to the next slide. And then this statue right here is the Martin Luther Jr. King statue. And it signifies Martin Luther King pointing to where we ought to go in the future. And as you can know, Martin Luther King attended the school, and a few other people who attended Morehouse was Samuel L. Jackson and Spike Lee.
Also at Morehouse, there was a mural that honored the legacy of black leaders such as Ida B. Wells, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, and the soldiers too. And it reminds us that the fight for civil rights is built on generations of courage, unity, and perseverance, and that we're standing here to connect us to that history and challenge us to improve for further on. Next slide. Also at Morehouse, there was a monument that showed Dr. Benjamin E. Mays, who is notoriously a president at Morehouse. And this monument is a symbol of education and leadership and inspires courage and social justice and reminds us to lead with a purpose further on.
We got a tour from class of '87 graduate Malcolm Wiley Sr. He gave us a tour of the factory, the main HQ. We ended up at the remade office of one of the former CEOs, where he told us about a story of MLK Jr. And he told us how Coca-Cola pressured the white business owners into going into a dinner party after MLK had won the Nobel Peace Prize. There were over 1,600 in attendance to that party. It sold out pretty quickly. Next slide, please. He then took us to the main HQ boardroom where most executives have their meetings. He told us about how he was a former Secret Service member and the current executive director of protection at Coca-Cola. He also told us about his journey and how he traveled and how DeMatha helped him with his success in his current life.
We had our last trip overnight. We had our last overnight stay in Greensboro, North Carolina. In the morning after, we visited the International Civil Rights Center and Museum, established February 1st, 2010, 50 years after the initial Greensboro sit-ins. Greensboro Museum provided valuable info about the Greensboro Four, consisting of Ezell Blair Jr., now Jabril Kazan, David Richmond, Franklin McCain, and Joseph McNeil. The Greensboro sit-ins were monumental as they expanded rapidly across the South and helped desegregate, not disintegrate, public accommodations by challenging Jim Crow laws. This event launched a youth-led movement leading to mass participation and inspiring similar protests in over 100 cities, ultimately contributing to the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
And I do want to thank everybody who was involved, a ton of people responsible for this. I want to thank Dr. McMahon personally for starting this whole project several years ago, along with Mr. Smith. They allowed me to join in for this past summer. Fantastic experience for me. I thought you guys did a great job. Sort of one of the things that stood out to me When we got to Greensboro, we did have a great guide, and he kept asking you guys questions. And you guys said, well, we were there yesterday or 2 days ago. And he was kind of blown away by just how much you had seen in such a short amount of time. So I want to thank you guys for a great trip, and the other faculty members along, and all of the alumni who helped out along the way or beforehand. All right, so thank you, and hope to continue this program in the coming years.